They stole her savings, framed her as unstable, and thought she would stay silent. But Samantha Grayson wasn't the weak daughter they remembered. She was about to expose every hidden betrayal. When the final truth surfaced, the family that broke her would never recover. The steady hum of the office projector filled the conference room as Samantha Grayson adjusted the notes on her tablet. At 35, she was a marketing manager who had fought her way up in the fast-paced corporate world of Lincoln, Nebraska. Every detail mattered in her campaigns: the timing of a launch, the precision of a slogan, the way a color could sway consumer decisions. But that morning, despite her carefully rehearsed presentation, she couldn't concentrate. Her phone buzzed on the table, its vibration cutting through the tense silence of the meeting. She glanced at the screen, expecting an email or perhaps a reminder notification. Instead, a message from her younger sister, Olivia, lit up the display. "Send me $2,800 for prom." Samantha froze. Her jaw tightened as the number flashed in her mind. $2,800. For a dress. For a limo. For one night of high school vanity. She felt the sting immediately, not just the audacity of the request, but the entitlement behind it. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard of her phone. She typed a quick reply before she could stop herself. "Earn it yourself." It was blunt, perhaps too sharp, but she refused to apologize. Olivia was 18 now, perfectly capable of finding a part-time job, of learning responsibility. Samantha had spent her teenage years juggling work and school just to keep herself afloat. She had clawed her way through college with no safety net, scraping together every dollar to pay tuition. And now her sister demanded thousands for a single night? The meeting ended minutes later, though Samantha barely remembered what had been discussed. She reached her desk and found another notification waiting. This time it wasn't Olivia. It was her parents. Her mother, Margaret Grayson, the family's matriarch, a woman with a tongue sharp enough to cut glass, had sent a text that made Samantha's chest tighten. "Pay or get out of this family." Seconds later, another message followed from her father, Charles. His words were shorter, but carried a cold edge. "Do the right thing, Samantha." Her heart thudded in her chest. She stared at the glowing screen in disbelief. For years, she had quietly supported them, sending money whenever they claimed to be in trouble. Mortgage late? She wired funds. Car repairs? She covered it. Groceries? Utilities? She sent what she could, always under the assumption it was for genuine emergencies. But this? A demand that she bankroll Olivia's prom, or risk being cut off from her family entirely. Anger surged through her, hot and overwhelming, mixing with a sharp sting of betrayal. She felt as though the ground beneath her had shifted, that all the sacrifices she'd made had been a cruel illusion. Maybe they hadn't been relying on her out of necessity at all. Maybe they had been exploiting her trust for far longer than she had ever dared to imagine. That night, she paced the length of her apartment, her thoughts spiraling. The city lights of Lincoln twinkled outside her window, but she barely saw them. Her mother's words echoed in her mind like a cruel refrain: "Pay or get out of this family." By midnight, Samantha had made her choice. She pulled out her laptop, opened her banking dashboard, and began hitting the cancel button on every automated transfer she'd set up over the years. One by one, she severed the invisible threads tying her finances to theirs. Cancel. 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 Her fingers trembled, but with each click came a strange, liberating relief. She wasn't just ending the transfers, she was taking back control of her life. By 8:30 the next morning, Samantha's world had shifted upside down. What had once been routine was now uncertain. Her phone remained eerily silent, as though her family were regrouping, preparing their next move. And deep inside, she sensed something darker was waiting beneath the surface, something she had never suspected. To understand why her sister's demand cut so deeply, Samantha often thought back to her childhood. She had been 17 when Olivia was born. 17, already carrying the weight of independence on her shoulders while her parents poured their love, attention, and limited resources into the baby of the family. Her mother, Margaret, ruled their household like a queen, dictating every decision, while Charles played the quiet loyalist, rarely questioning her authority. They lived beyond their means, always striving for a lifestyle they couldn't afford. Designer clothes for Olivia, extravagant birthday parties, weekend getaways that pushed them deeper into debt, all while Samantha worked part-time jobs just to scrape by. She remembered being 16 and begging for $50 to go on a school trip. Her mother's sharp reply had cut her down. "We can't afford it, Samantha. Figure it out." Yet 2 years later, Olivia, barely old enough to know the value of money, was given hundreds for concert tickets without hesitation. The double standard was glaring, and it never changed. By the time Samantha was 25, she had built her career from scratch. She landed her first marketing role and quickly earned a reputation for discipline and creativity. By 30, she was running major campaigns and living comfortably on her own. But her parents never saw her success as independence. They saw it as security for themselves. For years ago, she'd made her greatest mistake, setting up a joint family account. It was meant for essentials, to help with utilities, groceries, and the occasional emergency. She hadn't monitored it closely, trusting her parents to use it responsibly. She thought she was doing the right thing, easing their stress while she focused on her own career. But Olivia had been raised differently. At 18, she believed luxury was her birthright. $500 dresses, $200 dinners, new phones, endless shopping sprees. And Margaret enabled it all, with Charles silently nodding along. Samantha had seen the signs. A new bracelet on Olivia's wrist. Her mother's vague explanations about unexpected bills. But she dismissed her suspicions, telling herself she was overthinking. After all, they were family. Now, as she sat in her office staring at her phone, Samantha realized the truth she had ignored for years. Her parents hadn't been struggling. They had been using her. The text from Olivia buzzed again in her mind. "I need $2,800 for prom. Send it now." Her blood boiled all over again. When she refused, Olivia called within seconds. Samantha could still hear her sister's voice, shrill and entitled. "You're so selfish, Sam. It's just prom. Why can't you help me?" "You're 18, Samantha had replied, her voice steady despite the fury building inside her. "Plenty of kids get jobs to pay for prom. Try it." But Olivia scoffed, venom dripping from her words. "You don't get it. I deserve this." Then she hung up. Samantha stared at the silent phone, her pulse racing. The word deserve echoed in her mind. When had her sister started believing she had a right to Samantha's money? The hours crawled by, but the sting of betrayal only deepened. By noon, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a voicemail Olivia hadn't meant to send. "Mom, Dad." Samantha's being impossible, Olivia whined, her voice thick with manufactured tears. "Tell her to pay." Samantha froze. She could almost see Olivia pacing in their parents' living room, playing the victim as always. Minutes later, another text landed. From Margaret. "Pay for your sister's prom, or don't bother calling yourself part of this family." From Charles. "Do the right thing." Her hands trembled as she read them. The right thing. As though years of sacrifice, of wiring thousands of dollars to keep them afloat, counted for nothing. Her chest tightened. This wasn't just about prom. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. And for the first time, Samantha decided she was done ignoring it. Samantha's hands hovered above the keyboard, her pulse thudding so hard she could feel it in her fingertips. She had canceled the transfers last night, but something told her that wasn't enough. Her parents weren't just greedy, they were hiding something. The threats in their messages didn't feel like the desperate cries of a struggling family. They felt like ultimatums from people cornered by secrets. She opened her banking dashboard again, her eyes darting over the numbers she knew so well. At first glance, everything looked normal. But Samantha had lived her life in spreadsheets, budgets, and campaign analytics. Her trained eye could spot inconsistencies faster than most. And there it was. An outflow she hadn't noticed before. Small enough not to raise suspicion at first, but frequent enough to add up. 200 here. $350 there. Repeated like clockwork over the last 2 years. The withdrawals weren't for groceries, or utilities, or emergencies. The money had been redirected into a secondary account, one she didn't recognize. Her breath caught. Someone had been siphoning her money under the radar, quietly enough that she wouldn't notice unless she dug deeper. She clicked the account details. The name on it made her stomach twist. Olivia Grayson. Her 18-year-old sister had her own debit card linked to the family account. Samantha gripped the edge of her desk, her knuckles turning white. She had been paying not just for household bills, but for Olivia's lifestyle for years. Her mind reeled back to all the clues she had dismissed. Olivia's designer sneakers. Her sudden weekend trips with friends. The sleek new iPhone she'd flashed at Thanksgiving. Samantha had assumed her parents were spoiling her, bending their own strained finances to keep their youngest daughter happy. But no, the truth was worse. They had been spoiling Olivia with Samantha's money. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Margaret. "Your sister deserves this, Samantha. She's worked hard. Don't be cruel." Cruel. The words stabbed at her like a blade. Margaret had always been a master manipulator, twisting language until guilt became a weapon. Samantha remembered being 13, standing in the kitchen while Margaret scolded her for refusing to babysit Olivia. "Don't be selfish, Sam. Family comes first." But this wasn't family. This was exploitation. Her office felt suddenly suffocating. Samantha grabbed her bag, ignoring the stack of reports on her desk, and walked out. She barely registered the receptionist's greeting as she exited the building. The autumn air hit her face, sharp and cold, but it didn't clear the storm brewing in her chest. By the time she reached her apartment, she knew what she had to do. She pulled out the fireproof lockbox she kept in her closet and retrieved the stack of old bank statements she had printed over the years. She spread them across her dining table, a paper trail of her supposed generosity. Hours blurred as she traced the numbers with a pen, circling anomalies, drawing arrows where money vanished without explanation. The pattern was undeniable. Not only had Olivia been siphoning funds, but her parents had been covering for it. Worse, there were transfers Samantha didn't recognize, going beyond Olivia's account. They led to yet another name, Margaret Grayson. Her mother had been funneling money from the joint account into her own private account. Thousands over the past 5 years. Tens of thousands if she added them all together. Samantha pushed back from the table, her breath ragged. Her hands shook as the realization washed over her. Her sacrifices, the missed vacations, the long nights working overtime, the silent years of sending money without question, they hadn't gone to helping her family survive. They had gone into funding Margaret's illusions. She imagined her mother swiping a new handbag across a checkout counter, her father nodding quietly in the background, and Olivia bragging at school about her expensive lifestyle, all while Samantha tightened her budget, convinced she was keeping them afloat. Her stomach turned. The betrayal cut deeper than anything she had ever experienced. This wasn't just greed, it was premeditated deceit. Her phone lit up again. This time it was Olivia calling. Samantha let it ring. When the voicemail came through, curiosity got the better of her. She pressed play. Her sister's voice oozed with entitlement. "Sam, stop being difficult. You know Mom and Dad won't forgive you if you keep this up. Just send the money, and everything will go back to normal." Normal? Samantha's lips curled in a bitter smile. Normal had meant years of her family draining her dry. Normal had meant sacrificing her own life for theirs. Normal was over. But as she stared at the evidence scattered across her table, a darker thought crept in. If her mother and sister had been hiding this, what else had they concealed? How deep did the deception go? Her mind replayed her father's message. "Do the right thing, Samantha." What did the right thing mean to Charles? He had always been the silent accomplice, never raising his voice, never taking her side. He stood by Margaret through everything, even when it hurt Samantha. But now his words seemed heavier, almost coded. Was he blindly loyal? Or was there something he wasn't telling her? The questions gnawed at her, refusing to let her rest. By midnight, Samantha sat slumped at her table, surrounded by statements and scribbled notes. Her eyes burned from staring at numbers, but her mind was clearer than ever. Her family had betrayed her. And if they thought she would crawl back with her head bowed and her wallet open, they were mistaken. Samantha Grayson wasn't going to be their victim anymore. She was going to find out everything they had hidden. And when the truth surfaced, it would tear their perfect little facade apart. As the city outside her window slipped into silence, Samantha whispered to herself, a vow more than a promise. You wanted to play games with me? Fine. Let's play. The next morning, Samantha barely tasted the coffee she clutched between her hands. She had barely slept, haunted by the numbers she'd uncovered and the voices of her family echoing in her mind. Olivia's smug voicemail, her mother's biting texts, her father's cryptic warning, each played on repeat until she felt cornered. But now, as sunlight filtered through her blinds, anger steadied her more than caffeine ever could. She wasn't a teenager being scolded anymore. She wasn't the meek daughter who let her mother dictate her choices. She was a grown woman who had spent her life building a career, paying her bills, and standing on her own 2 feet. And she wasn't about to let them destroy everything she had worked for. Still, there were questions she couldn't answer with spreadsheets. Why had Margaret siphoned money into her own account? What was she hiding? And why did Charles, quiet, loyal Charles, sound like he was pleading rather than threatening? She needed answers. And there was only one way to get them. Samantha dialed her parents' number. Margaret picked up on the second ring, her tone clipped and sharp. It's about time you came to your senses. I haven't, Samantha said flatly. We need to talk. In person. A pause. Then Margaret's voice sharpened. There's nothing to talk about. Just do what you're told and transfer the money. No, Samantha snapped, surprising even herself with the steel in her voice. You're going to tell me why my accounts have been drained for years. You're going to explain why Olivia has access to my money and why you've been funneling cash into a secret account. If you don't, I'll go to the police. The silence on the other end was thick, heavy. For a moment, Samantha thought Margaret might hang up. But when her mother finally spoke, her voice carried an edge Samantha had never heard before. Cold. Calculated. You don't know what you're getting yourself into. And then the line went dead. Samantha stared at her phone, her chest rising and falling with ragged breaths. Her mother hadn't denied it. She hadn't even tried to gaslight her with excuses. That silence, followed by the veiled threat, was as good as a confession. But the words chilled Samantha. What you're getting yourself into. This wasn't just about money. Something else lurked beneath the surface. Her first instinct was to call Julia Bennett, her lawyer friend. Julia had always been her anchor during chaotic times, a sharp mind with the heart of a fighter. If anyone could help her untangle this mess, it was Julia. But another part of Samantha hesitated. If her family truly was hiding something bigger than financial manipulation, dragging Julia into it without proof could put her in danger. No, first Samantha needed clarity. She needed evidence. And to get that, she would have to face them directly. The Grayson family home hadn't changed in years. A 2-story colonial with navy shutters, sitting on a quiet suburban street where every lawn looked clipped to perfection. Samantha had driven past it 100 times, always with a mixture of longing and bitterness clawing at her chest. Today, as she pulled into the driveway, she felt neither. Just resolve. Her father's car was in the driveway. The curtains in the front window twitched, as though someone had been watching her arrival. Samantha squared her shoulders and walked up the front steps. Margaret opened the door before she even knocked. Her mother's face was tight, her lips pressed into a hard line, but her eyes betrayed something Samantha hadn't expected: fear. You shouldn't be here, Margaret said quickly, glancing over her shoulder into the house. This isn't the time. Then make time, Samantha said, stepping past her. The living room smelled faintly of lavender and lemon polish, the same scent Samantha remembered from her childhood. But the familiarity didn't comfort her now. It felt like a mask, a staged setting hiding rot beneath. Charles sat in his recliner, his hands folded, his gaze fixed on Samantha with an unreadable expression. Dad, she greeted stiffly. Samantha, he said softly. His voice lacked the sternness she expected. If anything, he sounded tired, worn down. Margaret shut the door and turned to face her, her expression hardening. "You're making a mistake, coming here like this." Samantha crossed her arms. "The mistake was trusting you. I know about the money. About Olivia. About your hidden account." Charles flinched, but Margaret didn't. Instead, she tilted her chin upward, her lips curling into something between disdain and resignation. "You always thought you were smarter than everyone," Margaret said. "Well, congratulations. You figured out a piece of it." "A piece?" Samantha's pulse quickened. Margaret's eyes flickered toward Charles, who shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Enough," he muttered. "No," Samantha snapped. "No more secrets. You're going to tell me everything. Why you've been stealing from me, what you've been hiding, and why you suddenly expect me to fund Olivia's prom like it's some life-or-death matter." For the first time in her life, Samantha saw her mother falter. Margaret's expression cracked, her eyes darting to her husband again, and Samantha realized with a jolt that the control Margaret had always wielded wasn't as absolute as she thought. Charles spoke, his voice low but firm. "It's not about the prom, Samantha. It never was." The room went silent. Even Margaret's sharp inhale was barely audible. Samantha felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "Then what is it about?" Charles met her eyes, his own brimming with something between guilt and warning. "It's about survival." Samantha froze. The words rang in her ears, heavy with implications she couldn't yet grasp. Survival. Not greed. Not indulgence. Not favoritism. Survival. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Samantha realized she had no idea what kind of danger her family had dragged her into. Samantha stared at her father, her pulse quickening as the single word hung between them like a guillotine. "Survival. What do you mean?" she demanded. Charles shifted uneasily, his broad shoulders slumping as if a great weight pressed down on them. He looked older than she remembered, the lines on his face deeper, his skin pale under the lamplight. Margaret's hand shot out, gripping the arm of his chair. "Don't, Charles," she hissed. "She doesn't need to know." "She already knows enough," he said quietly. His eyes flicked to Samantha. "She'll keep digging whether we tell her or not. You know she will." Margaret's jaw clenched, her nostrils flaring, but she didn't argue. She sat down on the sofa, crossing her arms tightly, as though bracing herself. Samantha leaned forward. "Tell me. All of it." Her father let out a long breath. "Your mother and we've made mistakes. Bad ones. Years ago, when things got tight, we borrowed money. Not from a bank. From people you don't cross. At first, we thought we could pay it back. But interest, it grew faster than we could handle. They don't forgive debts. They don't forget either." Samantha's stomach churned. She had imagined theft, greed, and manipulation. But this was something far worse. "Who are they?" she pressed. Charles's gaze flickered to the curtained window, as if even the walls might be listening. "You don't want to know their names. Believe me, Samantha. The less you know, the safer you are." Samantha's heart raced. "Safe? You've been stealing from me for years. You've drained my accounts, fed Olivia's every whim. And for what? To keep criminals happy." Margaret snapped her head up, her eyes blazing. "We did it to protect this family. Everything we've done has been for Olivia, for you, for us." "Protect." Samantha spat. "You call robbing your own daughter protection? You could have come to me. You could have told me the truth instead of treating me like some endless ATM." Her mother's face hardened. "You wouldn't have understood. Try me," Samantha shouted, her voice cracking under the weight of her anger. The room went still, the air heavy with tension. It was Charles who finally broke it, his voice trembling. "We didn't tell you, because they already know about you." Samantha froze. Margaret's head snapped toward him. "Charles. She deserves to know." His voice rose, shaking with years of pent-up silence. "They know where she works. They know where she lives. They've been watching her." A chill crawled down Samantha's spine, cold and suffocating. Her throat tightened as the implications slammed into her. "They what?" she whispered. Charles nodded, his eyes wet. "They said if we didn't keep paying, they'd come after you. That's why we kept taking your money, why we kept making it look like bills, like Olivia's expenses. It was the only way to keep them satisfied." The world tilted. Samantha gripped the back of a chair to steady herself, ball rising in her throat. Her own parents, using her life as collateral in a game she didn't even know she was playing. "You should have told me," she rasped. "You should have given me a choice." Margaret rose to her feet, her face sharp as a blade. "And what would you have done, Samantha? Gone to the police? That would have gotten us all killed. You think you're strong enough to take them on? You're not." Her mother's words sliced deep, but beneath them Samantha caught something else: fear. Genuine, bone-deep fear. And it terrified her more than anything. Because if Margaret Grayson, the woman who had always acted untouchable, was afraid, then whoever these people were, they weren't just dangerous. They were unstoppable. Samantha's phone buzzed in her pocket, startling her. She pulled it out, her hands shaking. A new text. No name. No number. Just a string of words that sent her blood cold. "You're asking the wrong questions, Samantha. Stop digging, or we'll start collecting in ways your parents won't like." Her eyes shot up, meeting her parents' stunned faces. "They're already watching me," she whispered. Charles buried his face in his hands. Margaret's lips trembled, but for once, she had no words. Samantha's breath came fast, her chest tight, her thoughts racing. This was bigger than stolen money. Bigger than betrayal. Her family hadn't just drained her. They had dragged her into a storm she couldn't yet see the edges of. And now, with the warning glowing on her screen, Samantha knew one thing with absolute certainty. She wasn't just fighting for justice anymore. She was fighting for her life. The words on Samantha's phone screen glared at her like a curse. "Stop digging, or we'll start collecting in ways your parents won't like." Her hands shook as she locked the screen and shoved the phone into her pocket. The walls of her childhood home suddenly felt suffocating, pressing inward as if they held secrets too dangerous to contain. Her father looked broken, his head in his hands. Margaret paced, muttering under her breath, while Olivia sat quietly in the corner, wide-eyed and pale for the first time in her life. The golden child finally realized the world didn't revolve around her. Samantha drew in a sharp breath. "You've been hiding from me for years, stealing from me, lying to me, and now I'm the one in their sights." Her father lifted his head, his eyes red and tired. "We didn't want this for you. We thought we could keep them satisfied until..." "Until what?" Samantha snapped. "Until they drained me dry? Until they showed up at my door?" Margaret spun toward her, desperation flashing in her eyes. "We had no choice, Samantha. You don't understand what these people can do." Samantha straightened, her voice firm, steady, even though her insides trembled.
"No, Mom.
You don't understand. I'm done being your lifeline. I've worked too hard, built too much, to be destroyed because of your lies." She turned and grabbed her coat from the chair. "This ends now." "Where are you going?" Olivia's voice cracked, small and afraid. Samantha paused in the doorway, her hand gripping the frame. She didn't look back. "To cut the last tie you'll ever have to me." That night, Samantha met Ellen Ward in a quiet cafe tucked off a side street. Ellen's sharp eyes scanned the bank records again, her expression grim. "You were right to close the account," Ellen said. "But this is worse than fraud. If these people are involved, you can't fight them alone." "I won't," Samantha said, her jaw tightening. "But I won't be a victim, either." "What are you thinking?" Ellen asked cautiously. Samantha slid her phone across the table, showing Ellen the threatening text. "I'm thinking they've made a mistake. They think I'm scared. And I am. But fear has a way of sharpening a person's resolve." Ellen leaned back, studying her. "So, what's your move?" Samantha's eyes narrowed, her voice low and deliberate. "I'm going to the police. With everything. The account records. The debts. The texts. All of it. And when my parents find out I've cut off their leash and exposed the truth, They'll know exactly what survival really means. 2 weeks later, Samantha sat in her apartment, sunlight streaming through the windows for the first time in what felt like forever. The police had taken her statement, the FBI had seized the records, and her parents' carefully concealed debts were now evidence in a larger investigation. Her parents had tried to call, but she didn't answer. Olivia had sent a single text, "Why are you doing this to us?" But Samantha had blocked her number, without hesitation. The constant buzzing, the guilt trips, the manipulation gone. In their place, silence.
Peace. And strength.
Samantha opened her laptop, drafting the final email she would ever send her family. "You made me believe love came with a price tag. You used me until there was nothing left to take. But you'll never use me again. Family doesn't mean obligation. Family should mean love, respect, and trust. You chose money over me. And now, I choose freedom over you." She hit send. The message delivered. Final. Unshakable. Samantha closed her laptop and exhaled. For the first time in her life, she wasn't the outsider, the ATM, the forgotten child. She was her own person, unbroken, unstoppable, and free.